Okay, we'll start with the endocrine system. The endocrine system are glands that we have throughout our body. Glands include, sometimes if you feel around your neck, you can feel some of the glands that you may have there. Um, they're ductless glands. So they don't have, the heart has arteries and veins. Um, Here, the hormones that are secreted and released by these glands are just released directly into the bloodstream. So they're not going through any special ducts throughout the body. They just go into the bloodstream and have their effect that way. Um, and the hormones affect specific organs. So certain hormones will work on certain organs and not do anything to other organs. They regulate many of the intricate body functions. So these hormones from the glands are very important in getting the different organs in our body to do what they need to do. So we'll start with the pituitary gland. It's referred to as the master gland. It secretes hormones that control the functions of other glands. So kind of the boss of most of the other glands is the pituitary gland. It controls other glands. It's also known as the hypophysis. So if you were ever asked, what's the other name for the pituitary gland? It's hypophysis. It has two distinct lobes. Each lobe has a specific function. So the anterior lobe, the anterior pituitary gland, is referred to as the adenohypophysis. It secretes growth hormone, which is also called somatotropic hormone, STH. So GH, if you ever see GH, that would be growth hormone, but it's the same thing as somatotropic hormone, STH. Regulates the growth of bone, muscle, and other body tissues. So our ability to grow from birth until we reach our full height is controlled by the anterior pituitary gland and by growth hormone or somatotropic hormone. Now we are able to treat children who seem to be not as tall as they should be at their age. And we're not talking someone that's just a little, not super tall because it's not in their genes, but sometimes children can be quite a bit smaller than you would expect. We can treat them by very carefully giving them growth hormone externally by injection, allowing them to grow more during that time until they reach their full height. Very common nowadays. Again, it's not going to be given to any child that just wants to be tall. It doesn't go that way. But it is for those that for some reason appear that they're going to be quite on the short side. Okay. All right. It also secretes adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. And ACTH is a very common abbreviation that we use. Stimulates the normal growth and development of the adrenal cortex and the secretion of corticosteroids. So the body secretes steroids. Corticosteroids is what we call them when they're in the body. But they are steroids. And they are similar to, you hear of people being on steroids, taking steroids, being treated with steroids. It's basically the same thing. It's just that our body provides it, and it's used for different reasons, in order to protect our body or to help us, move forward and get through certain things. The steroids will help with that. It also secretes thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. And TSH promotes and maintains normal growth and the development of the thyroid gland. So, so it's for the TSH is for the thyroid gland, and the thyroid gland secretes thyroid, which is a very important hormone in the body. It is very common for someone to have a low thyroid level, very easily treated. We can give what we call levothyroxine. It is a synthetic thyroid that you can take every day and keep your level normal. Because if and we'll talk about this in the second class more, if the thyroid level is too high or too low, there are some serious consequences. So it's easily treated in most cases where you simply take a pill every day and your level is normal. Okay, also in the anterior pituitary gland secretes lactogenic hormone, also called prolactin. Promotes the development of breasts during pregnancy and stimulates the secretion of milk from breast after delivery of the baby. So we need prolactin, the hormone prolactin, in order to secrete milk to breastfeed after the baby is born. And follicle stimulating hormone, FSH. Follicle stimulating hormone stimulates the secretion of estrogen and the production of eggs in the female ovaries. So FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, stimulates the secretion of estrogen. And estrogen is needed for the production of eggs in the female ovaries. Stimulates the production of sperm in the male testes. So, you often think men have testosterone, women have estrogen. Well, really, it's more men have a lot of testosterone and a little estrogen. Women have a lot of estrogen and a little testosterone. So we all need both. But follicle stimulating hormone is very important for estrogen for women and men. Secretes luteinizing hormone, which stimulates female ovulation and the secretion of testosterone in the male. So again, needed for both males and females. So for female ovulation, that is when the ovaries release the egg. The eggs are in the ovaries, they need to mature, and then when an egg is mature, once a month, normally an egg is released, but you need luteinizing hormone for the egg to be released. And then also for testosterone in the male, we need luteinizing hormone. And finally, melanocyte stimulating hormone, MSH, melanocyte stimulating hormone, controls the intensity of pigmentation in pigment cells of the skin. So someone that does not have MSH might have albinism, where the skin is very, very pale because there is no melanin to color the skin. Again, read your chapters. It'll take what we're talking about today and then give you more information. So it'll round out what we're talking about. So that was the anterior pituitary gland. So as we said in the past, anterior means the front. Posterior is toward the back. So the back of the pituitary gland is the posterior pituitary gland, called the neurohypophysis. Secretes antidiuretic hormone, ADH. Antidiuretic hormone is also known as vasopressin. It decreases the excretion of large amounts of urine. So it's important to urinate, but we don't want to release a lot more fluid than we ought to. So in order to keep the balance, we use antidiuretic hormone. A diuretic is a drug or a hormone that increases urination, increases the release of urine. So an antidiuretic hormone works against that in order to cause a balance so that we're just excreting the amount of urine we need to. Increases the reabsorption of water by the renal tubules, maintaining the body's water balance. So later on tonight, we'll talk about the kidneys and the renal tubules. Renal refers to the kidneys. Anytime you see the word renal, R-E-N-A-L, that is the kidneys. And in there are tubules, which are where urine and waste is produced. So it increases reabsorption of water by the renal tubules. So in the kidneys, we release water, but then we also resorb it so that we keep it to just the amount that needs to be urinated. The posterior pituitary gland also secretes oxytocin, OT, stimulates the contraction of the uterus during childbirth. So for childbirth, you do need oxytocin. Stimulates the release of milk from the breast of lactating women in response to the suckling reflex of the infant. So oxytocin is needed for childbirth, for the contraction of the uterus, and then also for lactation. After childbirth, if the body isn't contracting the uterus, bringing it back down to size quickly enough, we can give external oxytocin, a drug called Pitocin, that we can inject in order to do that. But we're just mimicking what the hormone does. So again, this is all, pretty complex. There's so many hormones and they all do so many things. It's important just to know the basics of what are these hormones and what do they do. True or false, the pituitary gland is known as the master gland and has an intricate duct system to all the organs it controls. And while false, it is the master gland, but as we said, it has no ducts. The hormones are secreted directly into the bloodstream, and then they just flow in the blood to their target organs. Okay, next is the pineal gland, a tiny pine cone shaped gland. That's why it's called PIN, pineal gland, because it's based on Latin for pine cone. Located on the dorsal aspect of the midbrain region. Plays a part in supporting the body's biological clock. So regulates the patterns of eating, sleeping, and reproduction. It secretes melatonin and induces sleep, which induces sleep. So it's part of the circadian rhythm of our body of, when we get hungry, when we get sleepy, and also with reproduction. As we said, it secretes melatonin. You can actually buy melatonin. It is a natural hormone that allows your body to relax, to go to sleep. It's not a sedative. It's just a naturally occurring hormone that kind of tells our body, okay, it's time to sleep now. So you can buy it, and it's actually, if you can't sleep, it's actually a good way to start. If you need to take something for a while, it's a safe way to do it. Also very inexpensive. You would take about 3 milligrams a night, 3 to 5 to 10. Start out with 3, but you can take it. It's a nice way to try to help you sleep if you need it. Okay, so as we see here, here's the brain from the side. We see the pituitary gland, the master gland. We see 2 lobes, the anterior lobe, and at the back, the posterior lobe. And then here is a bigger view of it. So we see the 2 lobes again here. Okay. Again, the pineal gland is toward the back. So we said the dorsal aspect of the brain. So dorsal would be toward the back of the brain, toward the back of our head, and the pineal gland would be up here. Okay, the thyroid gland. located in the front of the neck, just below the larynx, on either side of the trachea. Consists of a right lobe and a left lobe. So if you had a thyroid gland that was hypertrophied, um, or getting too large because it's being overworked, if you were examined by a medical practitioner, they could feel uh, the thyroid gland. They could feel that it is large, and that might tip them off that there may be something going on wrong with it that needs to be looked at. So here we have the inside of the throat. Here's the thyroid gland. It's this is actually thyroid cartilage. Oh, okay, never mind. Yeah, so here's the thyroid gland. So it can be palpated by the physician or nurse practitioner or physician assistant. But you see two lobes, right lobe and left lobe. So it secretes triiodothyronine, T3, triiodothyronine, which is thyroid. It's a thyroid hormone. Helps regulate the growth and development of the body, helps control metabolism and body temperature. It secretes thyroxine, which is T4, which helps maintain the normal body metabolism, and secretes calcitonin, which regulates the level of calcium in the blood. So basically, it secretes thyroid hormones that are needed for our metabolism. If you have too little, your metabolism may get sluggish. You may feel tired all the time. If you have too much, you may, feel kind of hyped up, lose weight. So it does need to be maintained. And then again, there's several thyroid hormones that are looked at. When a blood test is done, it'll look at T3, T4, TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. So all of that will be looked at in a blood test. It also secretes calcitonin, which regulates calcium in the blood and regulates, the amount of calcium in the blood has to do with how much calcium you have in the bones. So it helps to keep the right balance in the body. Okay, parathyroid glands. These are four tiny rounded bodies located on the dorsal aspect of the thyroid gland. So they're at the back of the thyroid gland. They secrete parathyroid hormone, PTH. So the parathyroid gland at the back of the thyroid gland, there's four of them, secrete PTH, parathyroid hormone, also known as parathormone. You don't need to know that. I'd never heard in my 40 years that it was called parathormone. Just know it's parathyroid hormone, PTH. Also regulates the level of calcium in the blood. So different hormones often will do about the same thing, and then it's going to be a balance of all the hormones together. Again, just tells you how complex our bodies are and how amazing it is that our bodies can do all these things just on its own. So here's the thyroid gland in our throat below the larynx. This is from the back, and here are the four parathyroid glands. They're little tiny glands on the back of the thyroid gland. Next is the thymus. It's one gland located in the mediastinum near the middle of the chest. So the mediastinum is the middle of the chest. So it's near the middle, just below the sternum. The sternum is the bone that you can feel on your chest. It's where the two sides of the rib cage attach. As we've seen in the past, some of the ribs attach to it. Just behind it is the thymus. It's large in fetus and infants and then shrinks as the child grows up. It secretes thymosin and thymopoietin. So for the thymosin and thymopoietin, this stimulates the production of T cells that are involved in the immune response. We have several cells that are used for immunity And one of the most important are the T cells that are able to attack foreign bodies, bacteria, and viruses that get into our body. When we talked about AIDS, when we do talk about AIDS more, one of the first signs when AIDS first started in the early 80s, not started, but when we started to recognize it in the early 80s, we knew that there was something was going on, and then we realized it was a virus. We saw the T cell counts went very low, which left the body with very little immunity, and so open to a lot of other infections. And so that's why the T cells are so important. So thymus, think of thymosin and thymopoietin, and the stimulation of T cells. Question: both the thyroid and parathyroid glands regulate the levels of this mineral in the body, in the blood, and it is B calcium. As we said, there were the two that work on calcium. Calcium is very important in the nervous system, in the muscles. When our muscles contract, they need calcium in order to do that. Calcitonin encourages the storage of calcium in bones. And let me go back. Okay. Calcitonin is released by the thyroid, and then parathyroid is released by the parathyroid gland. So it encourages the storage of calcium in the bones, and it balances how much calcium is in the bloodstream. The adrenal glands. There are two small glands, one on top of each kidney. So they're right on top of the kidney. They're known as the suprarenal glands. Supra means on top. Renal, we said, means kidney. So it means on top of the kidney, suprarenal glands. So the adrenal glands consist of an adrenal cortex. Cortex is always the outer portion, and an adrenal medulla. Medulla always means the inner portion or toward the middle. And each has an independent function. So each layer of the adrenal gland has its own function. Okay, so here's our kidney. There's one on the left, one on the right, and on top is this adrenal gland. The adrenal cortex is the outer part. Cortex comes from the Latin word for bark. We think of the word cork, like cork is actually the bark of a tree, of the cork tree. Cork comes from the C-O-R, comes from Latin, also means bark. So the outer part, cortex, is the outer bark. Then the inside, toward the middle, is the medulla, adrenal medulla. So the cortex, the outer part, secretes mineralocorticoids. Mineralocorticoids, again, corticoid is a steroid. It's a form of a steroid, and it regulates the mineral salts, what we call electrolytes, and how they're processed in the body. So electrolytes are the important levels in our body, which are, some of them are sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium. There's several. But the adrenal cortex secretes the mineralocorticoids that regulate how we use the electrolytes in our body and how we balance them. Glucocorticoids influence the metabolism of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins in the body. So another very important hormone, the glucocorticoids. They're also necessary for normal blood pressure. It has an anti-inflammatory effect on the body. It will increase glucose available for the fight or flight response of the body. Fight or flight, we may have mentioned it before, but it is the response when, say you turn around the corner and there's a lion there. you're going to not even think about it. You're going to turn around and run probably in most cases. That's the fight or flight response. If you were cornered, if you're stuck in the corner, you couldn't go anywhere, then you might fight. But if you're able to, you will flight, you will go. But the body will release at that second glucose to give you the energy to do that, to go. And also the epinephrine to get your body pumping faster, to help you to move faster. That's fight or flight. Gonatocorticoids, sex hormones secreted in small amounts, contribute to the secondary sex characteristics in males and females. So these begin to really secrete at puberty to give you the secondary sex characteristics. Okay, so now we're looking at the adrenal medulla, the center part of it. It secretes catecholamines. So a catecholamine, an example of a catecholamine is epinephrine or adrenaline. So when I said if you turn the corner and there was a lion and you suddenly ran, your body is going to secrete adrenaline. And we've heard of adrenaline gives you energy. Well, the other term is epinephrine. It's a sympathomimetic agent, which means it increases the heart rate and the force of the heart during contraction. So if something startles you, you know your heart's going to start beating faster and stronger. That is the release of epinephrine that caused that. It also dilates the bronchioles in the lungs. So it opens up, we mentioned, the bronchioles are the tubes that go into our lungs to bring air. It will dilate them, open them up so that you can get more air into your lungs and more oxygen into your body. Decreases the peristalsis of the intestines. So we said that the intestines are smooth muscle. We don't control them. Other parts of the body control them. And they move by peristalsis. So they move on their own to move food down. They kind of push down. When we're running, when we get epinephrine, all of our energy wants to go to our heart, our lungs, our muscles, so that we can run. And so less energy is going to be going to things like our intestines. We're not worried about whether we're going to digest our lunch at that minute. We're more interested in the other parts of the body. So we'll decrease peristalsis in the intestine and raise blood glucose levels by causing the liver to convert glycogen into glucose. So the liver, when we have too much sugar, when we have more sugar than we need in our bloodstream, normally it will be turned into glycogen and then stored in the liver. So with epinephrine, with this catecholamine, that is secreted by the adrenal medulla, the center of the adrenal gland. The liver will release that glycogen and turn it into glucose so that we can use that energy to run from the lion. It also secretes norepinephrine, noradrenaline. It produces a vasoconstrictor effect on the blood vessels, thereby raising blood pressure. So our blood vessels, the veins, and the arteries are going to constrict to raise our blood pressure to allow us to run faster. I know normally we don't want a high blood pressure, but when we need it, it's perfectly fine. We just don't want it to be high when we're resting or, at times when we don't need it. True or false, the adrenal glands are known for their role in the body's fight or flight response, and hormones from both the adrenal cortex and the medulla are involved. True. The adrenal medulla releases adrenaline and noradrenaline or norepinephrine, or the other terms are epinephrine and norepinephrine. And the adrenal cortex releases glucocorticoids. And again, these slides are there for you in Canvas. Okay, here's another much larger and very important gland, the pancreas. It's a long gland located in the upper left quadrant of the abdomen behind the stomach. So upper left behind the stomach, extends horizontally across the body. So it goes across that part of the body. So it secretes two things, glucagon and insulin. Glucagon is the hormone that stimulates the liver to convert glycogen into glucose when blood sugar is extremely low. So again, when our blood sugar is very low, so we're not talking about fight or flight, but if our blood sugar is low, our body should be able to release glucagon from the pancreas, which will convert the glycogen released from the liver into glucose to increase our glucose level. So if we don't have diabetes or some other chronic disease state, our body can regulate our sugar and keep it. Normal blood sugar would be about 100. If when you wake up in the morning, it should be around 100, maybe 90 to 100. After you eat, it could be, 140. But then about 2 hours after you've eaten a meal, it should come back down to 90 to 100 or so. So our body can normally regulate it if we don't have diabetes or something else. The other is insulin. Insulin allows glucose to pass from the blood through the cell membranes to be used for energy. So when we have sugar in our bloodstream, we may have a lot of sugar, but if we don't have insulin, insulin is like the key that unlocks the cell so that the glucose can go in and be used for energy. If we don't have insulin or the insulin isn't working correctly, all that blood sugar is not going to get into the cells. And even though there's more glucose than necessary, the cells are going to starve. And that's what happens in diabetes. Usually that's how we diagnose diabetes, because someone might start losing weight. They may start urinating a lot because a lot of sugar is being passed through the urine. And even though they have very high glucose levels in their bloodstream, it's not going into the cells. The cells are starving. Insulin also promotes the conversion of excess glucose into glycogen for storage in the liver for later use. So again, if we have too much, if insulin is working correctly, if we have too much glucose, it'll be converted to glycogen and then stored in the liver for later on. Lowers blood glucose levels. So here is the pancreas, fairly large, long, has its own arteries. And again, another very important organ. In the next class, we'll get into diabetes more, but if the pancreas is not creating enough insulin, and sometimes it can just stop creating insulin, or there's something wrong with the insulin and it's not working correctly, we can give insulin by injection and control the blood sugar just that way. And so we're mimicking what the body would normally do. Okay, the ovaries. They're the female sex glands. The medical term for sex glands are gonads. They're a pair of almond-shaped glands located in the upper pelvic cavity on either side of the lateral wall of the uterus. So we'll see when we look at a picture of it. They're on either side of the uterus. Near fimbriated ends of the fallopian tubes. And we'll see what that looks like. Responsible for producing mature ova and releasing them at monthly intervals during ovulation. So in the ovaries at birth, all the eggs for your life are there, but they're immature. And then after puberty, the body will start every normally every month to release 1 or 2 eggs that are mature. Because of the hormones, they'll be released every month. And so that's what the ovaries do throughout the childbearing ages. The ovaries also secrete hormones. Again, estrogen. We talked about estrogen before. Estrogen promotes the maturation of the ovum in the ovary. So as we said, at birth, the eggs are all there for the next, 40, let me think, 30 or 40 years of childbirth years. The eggs are there, but estrogen causes them to mature and be released each month. Stimulates the vascularization of the uterine lining each month to prepare for implantation of a fertilized egg. Contributes to secondary sex characteristics changes in females with the onset of puberty. The other hormone is progesterone, primarily responsible for changes within the uterus in anticipation of a fertilized ovum. So it prepares the uterus to accept a fertilized ovum. So the ovum is released, goes down the fallopian tube to the uterus. If it is fertilized by a sperm, then it will be implanted. And so progesterone will prepare the lining of the uterus to be able to implant the egg so that it can mature and then birth can start. The fetus can start to grow. Responsible for the development of maternal placenta after implantation of a fertilized ovum. So then progesterone will also help to create the placenta needed for the fetus. Testes are the male sex glands or male gonads. Testicles for two small ovoid glands located in the scrotum. Primary organs of male reproductive system, responsible for the production of sperm and the secretion of androgens, male steroid hormones like testosterone. Secretes testosterone, which is responsible for the secondary sex characteristics changes that occur in males at the onset of puberty, responsible for the maturation of sperm. So again, like estrogen, it also has its own. Estrogen makes sure that the egg matures. Testosterone makes sure that the sperm matures. Okay, now we'll discuss the eyes and the ears. Overview of the eye. The eye acts like a camera. Light and images go through the lens of the eye, and the lens at the front of the eye will contract, get longer, flatter, in order to focus it on the back of our eye so that we can see a clear image. The pupil of the eye, and it's the black part at the center of the eye, constricts like a camera to allow less light or more light to enter. So if you walk into a bright room, that circle is going to constrict so that less light is going in, because if you go to a movie theater and you walk outside in the daylight, it's going to be very bright. It takes a second to get used to it. During that time, that pupil is constricting to allow less light in, and then you're able to see better. If you walk into a dark room, you're going to have trouble seeing, but you'll notice after a minute or two, you can see much better, and that's because the pupil has opened up wide to let more light in. So through the bending of the light rays, through the lens, it reaches the back of the retina, and that's where there are nerves that capture the image, transmit it to the brain, and then we can see the images. And we'll talk more about this. Okay, parts of the eye. Starting at the front, the sclera is the white of the eyeball. It's a tough, fibrous membrane that surrounds the eyeball, except at the front of the eye where you've got the iris and the pupil and the lens. Maintains the shape of the eyeball and serves as a protective covering for the eye. So it's pretty tough, and it protects the inside of the eye. The iris is the colored portion of the eye. Some of us, like me, have brown eyes. Some have blue, green, gray, and that's all genetic. Um, the pupil is the opening in the center of the iris, and it controls the amount of light entering. And that's what we said, either opens or closes if there's too much light or it's dark. The conjunctiva is a thin membranous membrane layer that lines the anterior part of the eye and the inner part of the eyelid. So it's a thin, clear membrane that covers the outside of the eye and then the inside of the eyelid. So it can be kept lubricated so that when we blink, normally we don't feel the blinking. There's no pain. You can have dry eyes. You can get a little dust in there. You'll feel it. One little particle of dust feels like you have a beam in your eye because it's all very sensitive. Um, but the conjunctiva is the thin mucous membrane that helps to lubricate the eye. It looks white, but because it covers the sclera, it is clear. So you're really just seeing the white of the sclera beneath it. Lacrimal gland, that is the eye gland, the tear duct. Oh no, I'm sorry, it's the tear gland. So lacrimal comes from Latin. Lacrima is tear. So the lacrimal gland secretes tears, which keeps the eye lubricated. The lacrimal duct is located at the inner edge of the eye. So if you look at where the bottom of your eyelid is near your nose, if you look closely in a mirror, you will see a little tiny hole. That is one of the lacrimal ducts. So it's there to drain the tears, so that if your eyes water, or cry, you're going to see tears coming down. But for just normal lubrication of your eye, the duct will drain the tears that are in your eye. Now, as we get older, often we will get drier eyes. The tear ducts, the tear glands just aren't working as well. And they will actually, one thing they can actually do, I worked with our ophthalmologist on this, they will put a little, what they call they'll put a little plug into the lacrimal duct. And it's a very simple, they just basically get tweezers and put this little tiny plug in. And the idea is to plug up the duct so that more tears stay in your eyes if you have dry eyes. I actually did that one time. I was good friends with the chief of ophthalmology. So he said, sure, come on over. We'll put in some of these plugs. I don't know if they worked because within 2 days I had accidentally rubbed them out and they popped right out. So didn't do much, but that tells you how basic it is, the lacrimal duct. Okay, so here we see the white is the sclera, the colored is the iris, the black is the pupil, which opens and closes like a camera lens. Lower lid, conjunctiva covers the white of the eyeball and the inside of the eyelids. Eyelashes that keep dust out. And then here in the corner is where you would see the lacrimal duct. Right in here, you can actually see it. Okay, eyelids continuous with the skin and cover the eyeball. Keeps the surface of the eyeball lubricated and protected from dust and debris through the blinking motion. So as we blink, we're kind of like a windshield wiper, wiping away any dust or debris. And also keeping the eye lubricated, because as you know, if you were to keep your eyes open for a long time or hold your eyelids open, your eye's going to dry out and it stings. Eyelashes located on the edges of the eyelids, and they help to protect from foreign objects going into the eye. Sclera is the white of the eye. So we talked about that. It is thinnest over the anterior surface of the eye. So the front of the eye is the thickest at the back of the eye, near the opening of the optic nerve. So the eyeball gets thicker at the back, the white of it. The cornea is continuous with the anterior portion of the sclera. Transparent, non-vascular layer covering the colored part of the eye. So it is a clear, kind of a little dome that covers the colored part of the eye and the pupil. Within it is the lens, but the cornea is the covering over it. The conjunctiva, mucous membrane lining the inner surface of the eyelids, beginning at the edge of the cornea. We talked about that. The choroid. Choroid is the vascular middle layer of the eye. Just beneath the sclera, just beneath the white part, contains extensive capillaries that provide blood supply and nutrients to the eye. So like any other body part, it's got capillaries. And as we said, those are the tiniest blood vessels that allow nutrients to go out and anything that needs to be excreted go in to be carried away in the bloodstream. Contains the iris and the ciliary body. As we said, iris is the colored portion of the eye. You can see it. Again, some people have brown eyes, some have green, blue. I'm told that people with lighter colored eyes, lighter colored there, have more trouble with bright lights. My wife tells me that. Her eyes are green, mine are brown. So she says she's more sensitive to light. Pupil, located in the center of the iris, controls the amount of light entering the eye again. So the lens is the colorless biconvex structure that aids in focusing images clearly on the retina. So biconvex means it bulges out on both sides. So it's like a lens that you might think of for a microscope or a telescope, and it bulges out on both sides. So it actually changes shape to focus automatically the image we see. So if we're seeing something across the street, it's going to change shape to focus that image. And then if we look down to read a map, it's going to change again so that you can focus on the writing on the map. Ciliary body is located on each side of the lens, contains the muscles responsible for adjusting the lens to view near objects. So the ciliary body is what's going to shape that lens and change it depending on whether you're looking far or near. And that allows you to see things near and far. Again, some of us need glasses, like I do. And it's because the shape of the eye or the way the ciliary body changes the lens or the shape of the lens isn't quite right, and it just cannot focus it. And so we need to use lenses that will change it so that we get it focused. And that could be glasses or contact lenses. Suspensory ligaments radiate from the ciliary body and attach to the lens, holds the lens in place, and assist in the adjusting of the shape of the lens for proper focusing of the eye. So the ciliary body attaches to the suspensory ligaments, which changes the shape of the lens. Okay, now we're going to the back of the eye. The image goes through the lens and focuses on the back of the eye, and the nerves there will convert it into impulses that go to our brain, and then we can see the image. So the retina is the innermost layer of the eye. It's a sensitive nerve cell layer that lines the back of the eye. changes energy of light rays into nerve impulses, transmits the nerve impulses via the optic nerve to the brain for interpretation of the image seen by the eye. There are two different types of nerve cells in the retina. There are rods and cones. So this is important. Rods are responsible for vision in dim light and for peripheral vision. So what we see more to the side of our vision is for the retina. And then for dim light, the cones are for visualizing colors, central vision, what we see right in front of us, and vision in bright light. So cones are for bright light, what we're seeing directly in front of us, colors, and then more what we see to the side and dim light are the rods. These are all nerves. Macula lutea, it's an oval yellowish spot near the center of the retina. Fovea centralis, it's a small depression located within the macula lutea. So we have a macula lutea, it's an oval yellow spot at the center of the retina, and inside of that is the fovea centralis. It's a small depression. The sharpest image is obtained when the image focuses directly on the fovea centralis, which means central vision. So that is where we're going to get our sharpest image. And that's why if we need glasses, those glasses will be, the lenses will be adjusted to focus back on exactly on the fovea centralis. The optic nerve goes into the eye through the back of the retina. It receives the impulses from the retina, from those nerves, and transmits them to the brain. And then the brain then interprets them as vision. The optic disc, that is the point where the optic nerve enters the back of the eyeball, has no rods or cones. So it's known as a blind spot of the eye. So that's, again, that's the hole where the optic nerve and the arteries that feed the eye come through. So it's proven, and you can read more on this, but if you're looking at something, you may, for a second, you may not see something that's there because that part is focused on the optic disc where there are no rods or cones. So if a piece of an image lands there, you're not going to see it because there's nothing there to transmit it into an image. So there are ways to test it, and you will see that there's this blind spot for us. In most cases, we're moving our eyes a lot, we're kind of scanning, so we pick it up before we even realize we're not seeing it. Okay, so here's a side view of the eye. Here's our lens, and here are the suspensory ligaments that pull on the eye to change the shape. And here we said it was biconvex, so it's kind of bulging out on both ends, both sides. The pupil that constricts for bright or dim light, the iris that has color, we see that here. Ciliary body and muscle that attaches to the suspensory ligaments. The white is the sclera. The conjunctiva, as we said, covers here, clear and covers the white part, and also over where the pupil is, it's just this outer thin membrane, and then also into the eyeball. Then back here, we have capillaries that radiate in order to pick up add nutrients into the eyeball and also remove any waste. The optic nerve comes into here. Here's the fovea centralis, where you get the sharpest image here. But this is And then this area here where the optic nerve comes in is where you're going to have your blind spot, because there's rods and cones all along the back, but here there are no rods and cones. Okay. The anterior cavity of the eye. So the anterior chamber, the front, located in front of the lens, filled with a clear, watery fluid called aqueous humor. The posterior chamber, located behind the lens, is also filled with aqueous humor, and the aqueous humor flows back and forth between the two chambers. So let's go back and look at that. So there's going to be aqueous humor in front and behind the lens, and that fluid is going to go back and forth. So here it is here. Okay. So the posterior cavity of the eye, which is behind the lens, filled with vitreous humor. It's not a thin liquid like the aqueous humor. Aqueous means waterish, water-like. Here it's vitreous. It is a clear jelly-like substance that gives shape to the eyeball. So it's kind of like a jello that fills the inside of our eye to give it shape and keep it that shape. It is not constantly reproduced. So what you have stays there, and that's what you have for life. So if there was an injury and vitreous humor was lost and escaped from the eye, there could be blindness. The aqueous humor and the vitreous humor aid in refraction as light travels through the chambers of the retina. So like anything, light, if you're looking at something through water, it's going to change the way you see it. So as we focus, we've got to focus as that light goes through both the aqueous humor and the vitreous humor. True or false, the fovea centralis of the retina provides the sharpest image, also known as peripheral vision. Well, it is the sharpest image, is central vision, not peripheral vision. Peripheral vision is off to the sides. So it is the sharpest image, but it is central vision. So light rays enter the eye. They are transmitted through the cornea, the aqueous humor, the pupil, the lens, and the vitreous humor to the retina. The sensitive nerve cells at the back of the retina, the cells of the retina transmit the image through the optic nerve to the brain. The brain interprets the image as vision. In the second 4 weeks of this class, we'll talk more about what's near vision, what's close vision, what's nearsightedness, what's farsightedness, how do we correct it? We'll talk more about that. Now, let's go back. We can mention one thing. Here's the lens. You've heard of cataracts. That is, some young people occasionally for genetic reasons, but usually as you get older, you get cataracts. I will tell you, you should wear sunglasses as much as possible if you're out in daylight. Wear sunglasses as much as you can, because sunlight will increase your risk of cataracts. I learned that when I went to optometrist about 10 years ago, and they said, "Oh, you had the beginning of a cataract." I'm like, "What?" And they asked me, "Do you wear sunglasses much?" I said, "Not really." Well, you should. So wear sunglasses, good sunglasses, as much as you can, polarized sunglasses. But you can get cataracts, and that's a clouding of the lens. And what they can do is, it's a very simple surgery where they'll go in, it's an outpatient surgery, and they go in and they make a slit and they pull the lens out and put in a synthetic lens. And then within a day, you're fine. Very simple. really improves vision. And sometimes I understand they can put in lenses that will correct your vision. So if you used to need glasses, you might not need glasses after they put in the new lens after cataract surgery. Okay, refraction is the bending of light rays as they pass through the various structures of the eye to produce the clear image on the retina at the back of the eye. Errors of refraction occur when the eyeball is abnormally shaped or occurs when the lens has lost the ability to accommodate to near vision. Vision will be blurred and can be adjusted with corrective lenses like glasses or contact lenses. So it could be for two reasons. It can be when the eyeball isn't shaped exactly right, or the lens. Sometimes you're just, well, often you're born that way, but it can change during life. When I was a kid, I was fine till I was 4. Then I needed glasses for 2 years, and then I didn't need glasses until I was in high school, and then I needed glasses again. So your eyeball grows and changes. Um, let's see, what else was I going to say about that? Just as an aside, we're finding that children and adolescents are becoming more likely to have vision problems because they're inside the house more. They're not outside playing as much, and they're doing near work, such as studying more and also playing video games where it's more near vision. And because of that, the eye is growing sideways more than up and down, and they're getting problems with vision earlier. They'll need glasses. And so my ophthalmologist worked with me to get special eye drops, atropine, which is a kind of a vasoconstrictor, but in a very weak solution, they found if they gave those drops every day from age like 8 to 16, it would help the eye grow up and down more and correct that. So interesting. And they showed me studies that proved that it worked, but just kind of interesting that because kids are inside more, sunlight helps the eye grow up and down more. And if they're inside and doing near work, they're going to have more likely. So they are seeing more vision problems in kids now. Okay. Any questions about the eye before we move on? Okay. You can always message me. Okay, the ear. The two functions of the ear, it allows us to hear and it manages our balance and equilibrium. If you're feeling dizzy, say you spin around and you're dizzy, that's your inner ear. That's what's causing it. We have one ear on each side of our head, which gives us binaural hearing, which means we hear from both sides. So it's kind of stereo hearing. So the external ear is our ear, visible portion. The auricle or pinna is the earlobe. The external auditory canal is the tube leading from the auricle to the middle ear. It's lined with cilia for transmitting sound waves inward, and ceruminous glands, which secrete cerumen. Cerumen is earwax for lubrication of the ear. So the external auditory canal is the inside of your ear that you can feel, that you can put a Q-tip in, and we're told not to put them in too far because you can injure your ear. And we do have earwax or cerumen, and that lubricates that, and also it catches dirt and bugs and things, which will kind of get pushed out eventually and keeps it from going further into the ear. And then you go further in at the end of that canal, or the outside part, is the eardrum or the tympanic membrane. The medical term is tympanic membrane. Separates the external ear from the middle ear. The middle ear is inside. And it's the membrane for transmission of sound vibrations to the inner ear via the ossicles. So tympanic membrane is the eardrum. It acts like a drum It's taut, it's a thin membrane, and it vibrates, and that transmits what we hear is being vibrated through that and then goes in, and it connects to the ossicles. OSS means bone. So an ossicle is a bone, and they're very tiny bones that vibrate. So the middle ear, which is beyond the eardrum, contains three tiny bones known as auditory ossicles, auditory bones. There's three: the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. So the malleus, if you think of the word mallet, it's like a hammer. So the malleus resembles the shape of a hammer, connected to the tympanic membrane and transmits sound vibrations to the incus. So the malleus, the hammer-shaped little tiny bone, is actually connected to the eardrum. And then it connects to the incus, which resembles an anvil. I don't know if you've seen old cartoons. There's always an anvil falling on somebody's head, and an anvil is, something that they use to hammer out hot iron, like to make horseshoes. That's an anvil. So it's kind of anvil shaped. Transmits sound vibrations from the malleus to the stapes. The stapes is shaped like a tiny stirrup. It transmits sound vibrations from the incus to the inner ear. So sound vibrations go through the eardrum to the malleus that is connected to it. That vibrates attached to the incus, which then transmits to the stapes, the tiny stirrup. The middle ear also has the eustachian tube. It's a tube that connects the middle ear to the pharynx, which is our throat, also called the auditory tube. So when you go up in altitude in a plane or just drive up, when your ears pop, that's your eustachian tube. Those are the tubes that they connect to our throat, to the pharynx, in order to equalize pressure. So normally they will equalize pressure, and then sometimes sound will seem muffled, and then your ears will pop, and suddenly you can hear clearly. You can also kind of hold your breath and kind of push down in your head. I can't explain it, but you can kind of help to equalize that pressure more, break that pressure. The oval window separates now the middle ear from the inner ear. It's at the base of the stapes, which is the last of the three ossicles, and it fits into the oval window. Okay, so now we're in the inner ear. There's a vestibule. Vestibule is kind of an inner room, an entry room. It's the central portion of the inner ear, located again next to the stapes and between the cochlea and the semicircular canals. So now we're getting into the balance part of the ear. Contains the utricle and the saccule. They're membranous pouches or sacs that aid in maintaining balance. So now we're looking at the balance equilibrium part. And these pouches, the utricle and the saccule, are part of that balance. Then the cochlea is a snail-shaped bony structure. The COCH is part of Latin for snail. So it's a snail-shaped bony structure, contains endolymph and perilymph, fluids that aid in the transmission of sound vibrations. So just be aware of that. We'll look at a diagram of it. I know it's complicated, but it's pretty amazing how it all works. Okay, then we have the organ of Corti. It's the true organ of hearing. So all these bones and pouches all lead up to the organ of Corti. Spiral structure that's within the cochlea, which is also a spiral structure, contains hair cells or cilia. Cilia are tiny, tiny hairs that are stimulated by sound vibrations, which are converted into nerve impulses that are transmitted to the brain for interpretation as hearing. So sound goes through the eardrum, attaches to the first bone, goes through the three tiny bones, then goes into the inner ear, and eventually gets to these hair cells. All this vibration is going just to these hair cells. That is where the nerve impulses are picked up, and then it goes to the brain, and the brain interprets it as hearing. Semicircular canals. There are three bony, fluid-filled loops located behind the vestibule, and they help maintain balance. Okay, so let's take a look at it. The auricle is the outer ear. The external auditory canal is our ear, where you can stick a Q-tip in here. You shouldn't put it too far because you're going to push against the eardrum here. The other thing you can do, as a pharmacist, I'm telling you, if you have earwax here and you try to push in a Q-tip, you might impact the earwax. So then you've got earwax pushed up against your eardrum, and then you're not going to be able to hear for a while. And you've got to have your ears cleaned up. So you have to be careful with that. Okay, so here's the eardrum. It's actually attached to the malleus, which is hammer-shaped, which then is attached to the tiny bone, the incus, which is an anvil-shaped. It's connected to what looks like a stirrup, which is the stapes. And then we go through the oval window, and then here is the cochlea. And then over here are the semicircular canals. So the sound is vibrated through these bones, through the oval window. The sound goes into the cochlea, and this is where the little cilia are that have the nerve endings, and that is transmitted to the brain and turns it into sound. And then here we have the semicircular canals, and this is for balance. So if you spin around or on some sort of a ride and you get dizzy, it's because the fluid in here, there are these little tiny cilia and hair cells, and those are getting moved back and forth, and that can cause dizziness. Some of us are more likely to get dizzy than others. And then here's the eustachian tube, which has to do with pressure that goes down to our pharynx, and that's where your ears pop. The true organ of hearing is called the organ of Corti B. That's where sound waves are converted to nerve impulses and transmitted to the brain. It's located within the cochlea. Okay, so now we're going on to the urinary system, which the main part of which are the the kidneys. And again, whenever you see the word renal, R-E-N-A-L, that refers to the kidneys. So what are the functions of the urinary system? They remove waste products from the blood. They produce and eliminate urine. Kidneys produce the hormone erythropoietin. We call it EPO, erythropoietin. Stimulates the production of red blood cells within the bone marrow. So as we've said before, in the center hollow section of our bones is red blood cells, which are produced because of the hormone erythropoietin. We do know that people who have kidney disease or they have failing kidneys that aren't working very well, they will get low hemoglobin and hematocrit, which means they don't have enough red blood cells. As we said, hemoglobin carries oxygen throughout the body, transports it. So we need the red blood cells for the hemoglobin. We can give them an external injection, subcutaneous, under the skin, of erythropoietin. It is recombinant DNA, came out a little over 30 years ago. And it was one of the first recombinant DNA drugs. So it didn't come from an animal. There was no chemical from an animal or a plant. It was actually recombinant DNA from E. coli. And it's been a mainstay that we've used. You can give an injection twice a week and keep your blood levels up for patients who have kidney function problems. The kidneys also produce the enzyme renin. Renin aids in the raising of blood pressure. So we have some drugs that increase or decrease renin because of blood pressure. So the kidneys are a reddish brown bean-shaped organ located on either side of the vertebral column at the back of the upper abdominal cavity. So kind of above the small of your back on each side is where the kidneys are. Retroperitoneal, it's between the muscles of the back and the peritoneal cavity. Peritoneal cavity is where the stomach and digestive organs are. It has an outer layer, cortex. As we said, cortex is like the bark of a tree. Cork is the word. Cork comes from the Latin for bark. The cortex contains millions of microscopic units called nephrons. It's the functional unit of the kidney. So this is one of the main terms you should know, that these nephrons are in the cortex and they're one of the most important parts of the kidney. So there are two components to the nephron. There's the glomerulus. It's a bell-shaped collection of very tiny, coiled, and intertwined capillaries. So capillaries, as we said, are the smallest blood vessels, and they allow for nutrients and waste products to go back and forth in and out of the capillary. And then the Bowman's capsule, called the renal capsule. It's a double-walled cup surrounding the glomerulus. Okay. Okay. Within the nephron is the renal tubule. There is the proximal convoluted tubule, meaning closer into the body, the loop of Henle, and the distal convoluted tubule. You don't need to know this in depth. Even when I was studying in pharmacy school, I probably didn't learn it as well as I should have, but you just need to know the basics of it and the basics of how it works and what's important about how it works. But the nephron has the renal tubule, the proximal convoluted tubule, which is closer to the body, the loop of Henle, and the distal convoluted tubule, which is further from the body. Peritubular capillaries. So again, capillaries to allow things to move back and forth. Now, the medulla, which we know is more the middle section of an organ, the medulla is the inner layer of the kidney, consists of triangular tissues called renal pyramids, loops and collecting tubules of nephron. The pyramids extend into cup-like urine collection cavities called the minor calyx. Minor calyces, so one is calyx, more than one is calyces. Minor calyces merge to form major calyx. Major calyces merge to form the renal pelvis. Okay, so just know the basics of this. You don't need to get into the weeds in this. Okay, so this is what we just discussed. So this lighter color is the cortex. and that has the nephrons. Then here, these renal pyramids are kind of pyramid shaped. The medulla is more the center of the kidney. So the idea is that you've got all in the air are all these little capillaries going back and forth. And as blood flow goes through it, we have, again, it's another case of, because we have so many of these, we have increased um, let's see, wait. Okay, I'm blanking on it. But it's increased surface area. Increased surface area, so you've got more space for the transfer. So rather than just a flat space, it goes in and out, in and out, in and out. So you've got all this surface to have nutrients and excreted items to go through. We have a renal artery and a renal vein, so that we need good blood flow for the kidneys. So that goes in there too. And coming out of it is the ureter. And we'll see in another picture, the ureter goes down to the bladder. We have two kidneys, each has a ureter, they each go down to one bladder. Ureters, muscular tubes lined with mucous membrane. One leads to each kidney down to the urinary, from each kidney down to the urinary bladder. Urine is propelled from the renal pelvis through the ureters by peristalsis. So here's that word again, smooth muscle that kind of pushes down in a kind of a snake-like motion is peristalsis. So the urine is not just dropping by gravity, it's actually being propelled down. And the bladder, hollow muscular sac in the pelvic cavity. Between the pubis symphysis and the rectum in men, between the pubic symphysis and the uterus and vagina in women. Serves as a temporary reservoir for urine. Spherical shaped when full, resembles an inverted pyramid when empty. The urethra is the mucous membrane lined tube that leads from the bladder to the exterior of the body. Urine exits the bladder through the urethra. External opening of the urethra is the urinary meatus. The female urethra carries only urine. The male urethra transports urine and also carries semen during ejaculation. So here we see we have the two kidneys. You see the renal cortex, the renal medulla, the left renal artery, the renal pelvis, which is where urine collects. So we'll get more into it, but there's all the blood flow, capillaries, and things that need to be excreted go through here. Fluid comes out, but also it resorbs it, and we'll talk about that. So not everything comes out. Sometimes it takes some of it back and only lets out what needs to be excreted. So it collects here, goes down the ureter on each side, empties into the bladder, and then goes out the urethra. The bladder is smooth muscle, so we technically don't have control of it, but we do have control over the sphincter. So, babies wear diapers, but they can learn, as we all learn, to be able to control it and when to release the sphincter and when to open it. So that's one of the few times where we do have some control. True or false, the core unit of the kidney's filtration system is the nephron. And true. It contains millions of these microscopic filtration units. So in these nephrons, there's millions of them. They're microscopic. Blood flow goes through. Things that need to be excreted and fluid goes through them. to go out as urine. So the formation of urine consists of three distinct processes. So glomerular filtration in the nephrons, we talked about that. Then tubular reabsorption and tubular secretion. So the process begins as blood enters the kidney via the left and right renal arteries. The renal arteries branch out into smaller vessels throughout the kidney tissue. So there's a lot of perfusion. Perfusion means a lot of blood flow throughout the kidney because we have to get into those nephrons so that there's all this surface area to pick up waste product. So the renal arteries branch out into smaller vessels until these arterioles reach the cortex of the kidney. Each arteriole leads to a glomerulus. Glomerular filtration. As blood passes through the glomeruli, blood pressure forces materials through the glomerular walls into the Bowman's capsule. So we need blood pressure to force the materials into the Bowman's capsule. Okay, so what's being excreted here? It's water, sugar, salts, and nitrogenous waste, such as urea, creatinine, and uric acid that filter out of blood through the thin walls of the glomeruli. So we have all of this waste products. Urea is a waste product. Creatinine is the breaking down of muscles. It's what's left over when muscle breaks down. We also can measure creatinine because it'll tell us how well our kidneys are working. If we're seeing too much creatinine comes out, it means something's wrong with the kidneys aren't working as well. So we use that as a measure. And then uric acid, which is also a waste product. But then we have tubular reabsorption. As the glomerular filtrate passes through the renal tubules, water, sugar, and salts are returned to the bloodstream through the network of capillaries that surround them. So we filtered it out, but now we're putting it back into the blood. And that's because not everything has to come out. They have to conserve a good amount. They only want the real waste products to come out. Then we have tubular secretion. Materials are selectively transferred from the blood into the filtrate to be excreted in the urine. So let's go back. We get all this blood flow from the renal arteries going deep into the kidney, all the surface area of all these convoluted tubules going back and forth. So as the blood passes through, blood pressure forces materials out. Water, sugar, salts, nitrogenous waste such as urea, creatinine, uric acid. But then it gets resorbed. There's tubular resorption, and certain water, sugar, and salts are returned back into the bloodstream. And then tubular secretion, where only the real waste is removed to be excreted in the urine. Urine is consisted of water and other materials that were filtered and secreted into the tubules, but not reabsorbed. So what wasn't resorbed was the stuff that really had to be thrown out. Normally, 1% of glomerular filtrate is excreted as urine. So out of all that is filtered out and then resorbed, only 1% is actually removed from the body as urine. True or false is discussed in the text. The formation of urine begins in the glomerulus. Yes, only 1% is actually excreted. So characteristics of normal urine. Color changes. It can be pale yellow to a deep golden yellow. Darker urine indicates a greater concentration. So it might mean you're dehydrated. You may notice if you drink a lot of water, then urine may be nearly clear. And that's because you have a lot of water. You don't need all that water in your body, so it excretes it. But it's going to conserve urine. You're not going to get much urine out if you're dehydrated. And it's going to be very concentrated because it's got the waste product, but less fluid. Clarity, normal urine is clear. Sure, it's a shade of yellow, but it's clear. Cloudy, turbid appearance to the urine. Turbid means you can't really see through it. Maybe due to the presence of pus, bacteria, presence of a bladder or kidney infection, or specimen that has been standing for more than an hour. So often when we get blood tests done, we're asked to give a urine sample. You should get it to them. Often you just go into a room, get it, and bring it right back. But they are looking to see, one, they'll measure for protein, sugars. Is there too much sugar in it? Does that mean you might be diabetic? Is a lot of protein, as we discussed earlier, is protein being leaked out of your kidneys for some reason? That means there's something going on with the kidneys, that too much protein is being leaked out. And then, look at the color. Is there bacteria? Does it have a foul smell to it? Does it look like it has pus? That may tell us there's a kidney infection or a kidney infection. Odor: normal urine is aromatic, has a strong but agreeable odor. I did not type these slides, but it's not bad smelling. Specific gravity: normal urine has a specific gravity of 1.003 to 1.03. Specific gravity is the measurement of the amount of solids in the urine as compared to distilled water. So distilled water would be a specific gravity of 1.0. So urine is going to have more solid. So it's going to be just slightly above water, which would probably be if you were drinking a lot of water and urinated a lot and it was clear, or 1.03. If it's a lot higher than that, then it might mean something's wrong. pH. Normal urine is slightly acidic, a pH of 6.0. Now, normal pH range is 4.5 to 8.0. pH represents relative acidity or alkalinity of a solution. Is it more acid or more basic? The opposite of acid, something that's more like an acid, like hydrochloric acid, which can burn your skin, would be extremely acid. Basic is the opposite end. It's way, way less acid. Or alkalinity is the same thing as basic. Neutral means it's neither acidic nor alkaline, is 7.0. That's the midpoint that just says it's neutral. Below 7 is acid, above 7 is alkaline or base. So normal urine is 4.5 to 8.0. So it's somewhere in the middle. It could be a little bit acidic, it could be a little bit basic, but it's somewhere around the middle. Protein. Insignificant amount of protein may be in normal urine. So it should be a very small amount of protein. It will be undetected by a reagent strip. There are strips that you can use. We don't use them as much anymore, but you would dip it in urine and it would tell you if there's a lot of protein. I doubt they even do that in the lab anymore. I'm sure it's all done by machines. But if there's a lot of protein, it means the kidneys are leaking protein, and too much protein like albumin is going into the urine, and something's wrong with the kidneys usually. There is a disease called nephritis, and you see it in children where they will leak a lot of protein. I had a niece. She's now a young woman with her own children, but when she was just 3 years old, she had nephritis. And her face became very puffy, her ankles became very puffy, and she was leaking a lot of protein into the urine. And it was the kidneys were leaking too much protein. And because of that, the fluid wasn't staying in her blood and was leaking into the tissues. So luckily, she basically outgrew it. Glucose. Normal urine does not contain glucose. So if you have glucose, it means you have high blood sugar and your body is trying to get rid of it. And we have to figure out what it is. Ketones result from the breakdown of fats and should not be in normal urine. If we see ketones, it's probably a sign of diabetes, because what's happening is um, the cells in the body cannot get the sugar, even though there's a lot of sugar. So the body starts to break down fats to get energy, and then all that broken down fat starts to go out in the urine. So that tells us that you're in severe diabetic acidosis. Which substance, if noted in urine, indicates the breakdown of fats? And as we said, A, ketones. Ketones may accumulate in the blood, in the urine, and the cause must be determined. Often it has to do with severe diabetes that needs to be controlled. Okay, so let's go through some of the terms. Albuminuria. So we talked about, it's also called proteinuria. So it's too much protein in the urine, and we discussed it earlier in the class with one of the questions. And it's the presence in the urine of abnormally large quantities of protein, usually albumin. So it's usually the albumin that should be in the bloodstream, maintaining the amount of fluid in the blood. Anuria, it's the cessation of urine production or a urinary output of less than 100 mLs per day. Normal urinary output should be something like 1 or 2 liters a day. Could be more, could be less, depending. If it's less than 100 milliliters, which is 1/10 of a liter, that's called anuria. You're basically not urinating. Your kidneys are shutting down, or you're severely dehydrated. Bacteriuria, presence of bacteria in the urine. Dysuria, dys always means pain, painful urination. Again, could be an infection. First sign of an infection is painful urination. Enuresis is bedwetting, the condition of urinary incontinence, especially at night in bed. Enuresis is bedwetting. Ketonuria, we just discussed that. Excessive amounts of ketone bodies in the urine. Frequency. In the case of urinary frequency, urination at frequent intervals without an increase in the daily volume of urinary output due to reduced bladder capacity. So frequency usually means that one, either the bladder can't hold much, and after a little bit goes in and your body feels it has to urinate, so you're urinating a lot even though it's not much. In men, as men get older, the prostate gland, and we'll see that, I think Tuesday we'll talk about this, but the prostate gland can get enlarged over time, and it starts to pinch down because it goes around the ureter and it will pinch down on it. And so when you urinate, you can only force out a little bit, and most of it stays in the bladder. So you have to get up several times a night. So that's frequency. Glycosuria. Yeah, urea. Abnormal presence of sugar in the urine. So glycosuria, sugar in the urine. And hematuria, blood in the urine. Heme means blood, and it's blood in the urine, which again could be a kidney infection. So as we said, dysuria is painful urination, and so if there's painful urination or a smell to the urine that isn't normal, that needs to be checked right away, because that's probably a bladder infection. And if left alone, it will start to creep up the ureters, and the bacteria will get to the kidneys, and then you have a kidney infection, which is an even bigger deal and very serious because it could shut down the kidneys. So it's very important to make sure any bladder infection is treated. Nocturia, urination excessively at night, also known as nicturia. And that, like we said, with men with an enlarged prostate, they may be getting up several times a night. Oliguria, secretion of diminished amounts of urine in relation to fluid intake. Scanty urine output. So oliguria means Low urine output, anuria means no urine, basically no urine output, less than 100. Oliguria means, maybe 500 mLs a day, which is too low in most cases. Polydipsia, excessive thirst. We might see polydipsia in diabetes. It's one of the first signs of diabetes. And that's because, so you have a lot of sugar in the bloodstream, and that high amount of sugar is pulling fluid in from the cells, the rest of the body, into the bloodstream. Now you have to urinate a lot, so you're urinating a lot of urine with a lot of sugar, and now your body needs more fluid to replace what's going out. So that's called polydipsia. Polyuria. Poly always means many. Polyuria, excretion of abnormally large amounts of urine. Pyuria, pus in the urine, usually a sign of an infection of the urinary tract. Urgency, the feeling of the need to void immediately. Void means to urinate. Okay, other terms: fatigue, state of exhaustion or loss of strength and endurance. Fatigue, you feel very tired, maybe a sign of an underlying physical cause. So, if you're tired because you're out all night partying with your friends, okay, that makes sense. But if you find, all week long you've been tired, it's time to get it checked. I'm a big believer in, if something doesn't look right, have a good doctor and go and get things checked out and have tests done if needed, just to find out what's going on. Lethargy, the state or quality of being indifferent, apathetic, sluggish. So it's more than being tired. It's just like you just don't care. It's just like things don't matter. Malaise, a vague feeling of weakness or discomfort may indicate the onset of disease or infection. You may say you're getting a bad cold, you'll feel malaise. You're just kind of tired and weak. Okay. True or false? Frequency, urgency, and bacteriuria are common symptoms of a kidney infection. False. At this stage, it is still a bladder infection. However, bacteria will travel to the kidneys if not treated. It could still be, this could be signs of a kidney infection too. But in most cases, if it's only been a day or two, it's probably bladder. If you get bad pain at the back in your back, more to the side where the kidneys are, that's to be checked out too, because that could be a sign of an infection in the bladder. I'm sorry, infection in the kidneys.